Let's see. All right. Well, I think we are recording. Yes, we are recording. Okay. So I am here with Shannon Montgomery, and we're going to talk a little bit about her law practice and her recent experience training for and winning a bodybuilding competition. So Shannon, welcome.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Why don't you start with telling us a little bit about your law practice?
So I work with, I do intellectual property, and I say some transactional business work, but it's all mostly contract drafting review, that kind of thing, and trademark and copyrights. I don't handle patent work. And most of my clients are fitness entrepreneurs or fitness influencers. And I'm getting into sort of the supplement space as well and doing some work in that arena. I do have clients who are not fitness related, but the majority of my clients are somehow connected to the fitness industry. So that's kind of what I do in a nutshell.
That's great. And that kind of gets a little bit into our other topic, but how did you end up with these clients in the fitness related industry?
It all started on Instagram. I had a personal Instagram, and I hate the name. I hate my handle, but it is what it is. It's Lifting Lawyer. I started it back in law school, and I used it to post fitness related content. And I, absorbed fitness related content only on this particular page. And then I started getting questions from influencers and different people that I was following, legal questions. They'd pop into my DMs or they'd comment on something and ask me some sort of legal question. And I realized that there were a lot of influencers out there who are business owners, or who want to start businesses, or who just make a lot of money on the internet, and they didn't have any legal help. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and be the person to help these people out. I had, in law school, I spent a lot of time in the sports world. So I worked with a lot of sports agents, and it's kind of the same thing. What I do now is obviously a little bit more I help them with their businesses a lot more than I would for an athlete, but a lot of the contract principles and a lot of the IP issues are the same for influencers as it is for athletes. So that's kind of where I thought, you know what, maybe I'm a good fit for this because it's what I wanted to do in the first place. So yeah, it kind of all happened accidentally, really. But
That's great though. So I actually think Lifting Lawyer is a great handle. And that leads me to my next question, which is, before you were a lawyer, were you a weightlifter?
yeah, so I started working out when I was very young. My dad took me to the gym when I was in high school. I think I was like a sophomore. I might have been a freshman. I don't know if I could drive yet. So I might have been 15, maybe 16. And my older sister was really into lifting. So she did powerlifting at the high school. She was very athletic, and I was always a gymnast and a cheerleader. So I was athletic to an extent, but not quite like her. But she was working out with my dad, and I thought, you know what, let me do this too. This seems fun. And I went, and I just became obsessed, I guess you could say. So I have been lifting and working out in some capacity and training and doing all that stuff since I was in high school, and I just never stopped. When I got to college, I would skip class to go to the gym. I would plan my day around going to the gym. And I've been obsessed with it ever since I was a kid. So.
And were you able to continue a pretty disciplined weightlifting schedule in law school, or was that difficult?
Yeah, law school was the first time in my life when I couldn't skip class to go to the gym.
Right.
Because you had to go to class. But I definitely made sure that I planned all of my classes around my ability to get to the gym. So I never skipped I prioritize the gym. I always have. So you know how they say if you really want something and you don't have time for it, you make time. And so that's always been the case. You know, it was never a matter of, oh, I don't have time for this today. It was, what else can I take off my plate, because I have to be able to get to the gym and keep that structure, because it really keeps me sane and focused, and, you know, it allows me to be productive in the rest of my life.
That's great. I may come back to that because I think you're on to something there. You know, I was going to joke and say, well, it sounds like you had your priorities straight, you know, in law school, but it sounds like actually having that sort of regular schedule, it sounds like that actually helped you with your school. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm one of those people that if I'm not crazy busy, then I'm not productive at all. So I need to have structure. I need to have, my time has to be blocked out. And so having the gym as either I was in the gym every day by 7 a.m. typically because I love to work out in the morning, or, if class didn't allow, then it was okay, class, gym right after class, and then we go into studying and all of that stuff. But gym, there was always a slot for the workout because it just, yeah, it keeps me focused. So.
I see. And this may be a dumb question, but what's the difference between weightlifting and bodybuilding?
So technically I always say, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to lift weights or weight lift. So weightlifting, it depends on, I guess, the context you're using it. So if you're weightlifting, the technical term, Olympic lifting is weightlifting. So when you see people doing clean and jerks or snatches, which are the two Olympic lifts, that's technically called weightlifting. Bodybuilding is you lift weights, what you could weight lift, you can power lift, you can do whatever in order to build your muscle, build your body, so you can get on stage in a very small outfit and be judged for how well you build muscle and lean down, basically. So weightlifting takes a lot of skill. And if you're competing in weightlifting, you're obviously a very good athlete. Bodybuilding is one of those things that takes extreme dedication and you have to be very disciplined, but you don't have to really be an athlete. You just have to, get to the gym and you have to be very disciplined. So.
Okay, now, so how did you make the transition from just the weightlifting to lifting weights for bodybuilding?
Bodybuilding. Let's see. I think mostly it was I would get questions a lot in the gym. People would be like, "What are you training for? Are you a bodybuilder? Do you do physique sports? Are you a CrossFitter?" All that stuff. And I had no idea about when I was in law school. Actually, was my first sort of exposure to bodybuilding. I had always thought about it as in, like the Arnold Schwarzeneggers of the world, and I did not think women competed, or if they did, they looked like a female version of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I was not interested in that. But then Instagram actually kind of shed light on, well, social media in general, but mostly Instagram shed light on these other divisions. So the bikini division and the figure division, which are, for women, and it's not this extreme, you're not huge, and it's really meant to be more someone who's really just generally into health and fitness, and it's a place for you to kind of compete and showcase that. And so when people started asking me, I started looking into it, and it just looked like something that was right up my alley. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to start competing. And one thing led to another, and here we are 6 years later or something, and I've done 4 seasons and like 12 shows or something like that at this point.
Wow, okay. That's a lot of shows. Well, tell us about the most recent competition that you did.
Yeah, so I did the NPC. So NPC is the kind of the governing body. There's a few different organizations, but the NPC is what leads into the IFBB, which is for pro bodybuilders. And so you can go pro and you can earn money, although not many of them earn a lot of money, but you can. If you win shows and whatnot, you get paid. But the NPC Oklahoma Championship, so I was actually just in Oklahoma, in Tulsa. It was, I think, the second show this year to go on because of COVID. Everything that we had originally planned to do, I started dieting in January, I think like January 5th. And then every show, I was supposed to compete in early May. That got canceled. And then I picked another one, mid-May, that got canceled. So everything just kept, it was just like a domino. Everything just kept falling. But I got lucky, and this show in Oklahoma was like, you know what, we're going to go on. We're going to take precautions. They limited the amount of people that signed up and the amount of people that could come. And I went, it was my first show actually in 4 years. I haven't competed since 2016. And I did the bikini division, which was actually the 2 years prior competing, I've done figure. So I was kind of going back down into bikini. So I wasn't used to the posing or just that division in general. And so I was very, very nervous. But I went, and it was a great show. It was really well run. Everybody was super nice. I mean, there were 13 girls so they go by height. There were 13 girls in my height class, and I think maybe 40 girls overall in the bikini division. But yeah, so I won my height class, and then I won the overall, which means I beat out all the other girls in all the other height classes too. And it turned out really well. I was not expecting that at all. But I did well and I enjoyed it. So I'm really happy that I got to do it this year, because they're starting to cancel things again. So there are a lot of competitors out there that probably won't get to compete, which is a bummer. So.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's great. Now, what was it that made you want to get back into competition after 4 years of not competing?
You just never feel done, or at least I don't feel done. So I knew the last time that I competed that I was going to take a nice long break, and I was just kind of waiting for the right time. And in between these years, I moved from Florida back to Texas. And so when I first got back to Texas, I thought maybe that would be the year, and that just wasn't right. And then last year I moved into Houston, and so I was like, I don't really want to compete right now. So finally this year, January rolled around, and I was like, I'm ready to diet. I'm ready to focus. I'm really ready to actually do this, because if you're not 100% mentally ready to take it on, you should not even try, because it's exhausting. It takes up a lot of mental space. It takes up a lot of your time. So I was in a good place, both career-wise, and everything kind of fell into place, and I was ready to give it another shot.
You touched on this a little bit already, but when you decided to enter this competition, was your mindset like, okay, I'll do this competition and I'll have fun with it and see how it goes? Or was it like, I'm going to do this competition and I'm going to win?
I didn't necessarily think about winning, but I did want to. So in order to go pro, you have to get first or second place at a national show. And there are only 4 or 5 national shows throughout the year. So most of them typically in a normal year, not this year, but most of them are normally in the summertime. So I knew that the first show that I wanted to compete at this year, I didn't necessarily want to win, but I needed to get first or second so that I could get nationally qualified, because eventually I would like to compete at the national level and go for that pro card. Because why else? I mean, you can do it just because you love it, and which I do. I do get on stage just because I love it. But I actually have been told that I stand a chance of winning a pro card in bikini. So I was like, this is the year I'm actually going to go in there. I'm going to win first or second and get nationally qualified. That was like the expectation. I kind of figured I would just get second. And I kept telling my coach that I wanted to do a really small show so that there would maybe only be like 5 girls in my division, and I could get second place and I'd be good to go. And then I could step on stage at nationals. So I had no idea that I would take the overall, like by any stretch of the imagination, especially because I'm not used to bikini. And the posing is just totally different than what I'm used to. So it was like, I didn't have huge expectations, basically. I'll say that.
Okay. Now, what was the planning process like?
Ooh, well, I mean, I kind of started planning way back in, I would say, September of last year, as far as I knew I wanted to start dieting in January for a May show. So I wanted to have a nice long diet phase so I could go slow because crash dieting is not a good idea. So around September of last year, I started planning out what shows I wanted to do. I wasn't working with my coach at that time, so I was looking kind of for different coaches, maybe who I would want to work with. And then I started structuring my training around what I know they look for in a bikini girl, basically. So I changed up the way I was training a little bit. I kind of stepped back from powerlifting and focused a little more in like hypertrophy training for bodybuilding purposes, to kind of grow certain muscles and then let certain muscles stop growing because, I have bigger arms, and in bikini, they don't need that. So yeah, I kind of started structuring everything, maybe even before September, maybe even around like the summertime last year, in preparation for getting things ready for this year.
Yeah,
So
the time frame sounds pretty similar to my practice where we're getting ready for a trial, because you're planning months out.
mhm.
And was there anything that you learned from that planning process that you can apply to professional life?
Absolutely. And I mean, planned, what is it? Fail to plan, plan to fail. So just like with, I mean, running my own practice, and I don't litigate, so I don't have to have I don't worry about trial so much, but it's the same idea of, I mean, with trademarks, as you know, they take 6 to 8 months. And so you're planning, when you get to a client, you have to plan something out, maybe even a year out. And to be able to see the big picture while also seeing, the little day-to-day picture, which is 100% what a bodybuilding prep is. I mean, you wake up every single day and you have to take care of these minute little tasks that all add up to, your long-term goal of getting on stage, which could be a year away. It could be 6 months away, or, whatever. And it's the same thing in practice. You're waking up, especially when it comes to running a firm. You do these little things every single day that may not make a ton of sense until you look at like the big, larger picture, and until you can kind of step back and look at things from a macro perspective. You can say, okay, I plan, this day to do these things. And so it all adds up to being basically one long bodybuilding prep.
Right, right. I mean, it reminds me a lot of really business development. And I know you have your own firm, so I'm sure you know this, but so much of it is doing those little things, every day or every week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just being consistent in what you're doing.
Right, right. You mentioned your coach. How was your coach helpful to the process of getting ready for the competition?
I personally don't think you can, I mean, there are people who do it, but I don't think you can perform, or I don't think you can get ready without having a coach, because it's really hard to be objective about the way you're looking or how your training's going, or your nutrition, all of that stuff, for yourself. So having somebody who's outside looking in, controlling all of that. And I know personally for me, I would just grind myself right into the ground almost instantly. I'd be like, we're going to do 100 hours of cardio. We're going to train for 3 hours. We're going to not eat anything. And that's not the way to do it. So having a coach keeps me, it keeps me focused, and it helps me stay out of my own head and out of my own way, and really gives me the path that I have to follow. And I love structure. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I love it. And so really, if somebody else gives me the plan and I can just follow along, it makes it way less stressful to have a coach. So
Yeah, it's interesting. It sounds like your coach is not so much pushing you to do things, but more like keeping you disciplined and not overdoing it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, keeping me in line, basically. And I don't struggle with the discipline part. I'm a very self-disciplined person, as I think most attorneys are, I would say, or else we probably wouldn't have gone into this profession. So that part of it isn't hard for me, but knowing when to push or knowing when to pull back, I kind of need help with, because otherwise I'm just like push, 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 push instead of,
Yeah.
you know.
It's funny you mentioned self-discipline, because that leads to my question about diet, which you've mentioned. And that to me seems like maybe the hardest part of doing something like this. So what was your nutrition plan and your approach for that? How does one eat for a bodybuilding competition?
Well, it depends on who you ask. Obviously, nutrition is very personalized. But for me, I do what we call flexible dieting. And it's been around for probably 10 years now. So the typical old way of thinking was you had to eat fish and asparagus and chicken and flavorless things, and that was it.
Right.
the dogs. We only have to eat certain amounts of those things, and then that was it. But with flexible dieting, you essentially get to eat whatever you want. It's just you have to track your macros, so your protein, carbs, and fat. So my coach would give me certain macros to follow, and then within those macros, I'm allowed to eat whatever I want. I typically eat very healthy anyways, because you kind of think of it like a bank account. If you, for example, if you eat a donut, while you can do that when you're on a bodybuilding prep, if you're a flexible dieter, it's going to eat up a huge chunk of your carbs and your fat for that day. So then the rest of the day, you're going to have to be eating, you're going to use all your calories basically. So I usually just eat healthy foods. I eat a lot of lean meats, a lot of vegetables. I do love carbs, but I'll use like potatoes, rice. I do eat bread, that kind of stuff, to just essentially hit my calorie goal, and then within that, my protein, carb, and fat goal for the day. So
yeah, it sounds similar in concept to the Weight Watchers concept, which I think studies have shown is one of the most effective methods.
Yes, it is just like that. Weight Watchers is a little bit, it's not quite as, I guess, detailed, maybe is the right word, but it's the same concept, and it's from a psychological perspective, it helps people adhere to their diet way more because you're not saying no to anything. And you kind of learn to not want anything all that much because you know that you can have it at any point in time, as opposed to most people just say, oh, I can't eat carbs. And then when they do let themselves have carbs, they eat a box of cereal and 10 donuts. And you're like, no, that's probably not a good idea. So
yeah. Now my next question is one I actually asked you that something like this when we were talking way back at some CLE seminar, and it basically was, most people have a lot of trouble sticking to eating right. And so how do you do that?
Yeah. For me, well, I mean, I do love healthy food, and I do love that being in, this sounds so negative, but it's not negative. I love being in control of my nutrition. But really it's just making the decision to do something and then doing that thing. And that, I don't know if that's a personality trait that I just have. I don't know. So I always feel like I'm the world's worst advice giver because I don't know if that's something that everyone does. But for me personally, when it comes to sticking to my nutrition, or when it came to the bodybuilding prep and sticking it out even through COVID and the lockdowns and all of this stuff, it's just, I made a decision to do something. And so I'm going to honor that. And I'm going to continue to, make the right choices because I made this decision. So I'm going to stick to it.
Are you able to take that mindset of just deciding to do it and use it in your law practice?
100%. Honestly, that's when I decided to start my law practice. It was kind of like I made the decision, and then 2 days later, I had a law firm. So I'm not the best at giving advice, because when I decide to do something, like I have to do it. I have to get started on that thing right away, or I have to make some sort of move towards accomplishing that thing. And when it comes to the law, when it comes to my practice, that's pretty much how I get myself to do everything. Cause you don't want to do everything it takes to run a law firm every single day. Some of it's not that fun. Sometimes I'm like, I don't really want to do this. But if I make the decision and I tell myself this, XYZ is getting done today, then I have no choice. Like I have to do it. It doesn't get put off till later. Like it gets done because I make the decision to do it.
I'm just curious. I practiced solo for a short time. I'm with a firm now, but practicing as a solo attorney, what's the thing that you really dislike having to do, every day or every week?
Yeah. Well, for one, the accounting, I hate it.
Yeah.
I do have software for most of it, so it's kind of seamless, but I still just hate getting on there, and I don't like numbers,
Yeah.
I'm a lawyer, so I hate the accounting part of it. And then some, just like the what I would consider maybe administrative type stuff, like some of the emails and the intake. And
Sure.
I'm a true solo, so I don't have any help with the invoicing and all of that. And it's just those little tedious things. I'm like, I don't really want to be doing this right now.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Well, one more question on nutrition. So I know a lot of people are like me in that when you get really stressed, people, you tend to eat the wrong things, right? And I think most people can relate to that. When you're training and sticking to this very specific nutrition plan and running a law practice, I'm sure there's a lot of stress that comes along with that. How do you deal with the stress?
Well, first, let me say, if you are a stress eater, don't tell yourself that you're eating something that's wrong or bad. You're just eating something that maybe isn't ideal for that moment in time. Because there
Okay.
aren't bad foods in general. There are healthier choices, and then there are less healthy choices. Just as a disclaimer for people so that they don't feel guilty about stuff like that. And for me personally, I mean, I'm not immune to wanting to do that. And now that I'm not in a bodybuilding prep, if I'm having a moment of anxiety, it's like, maybe I'll have a glass of wine. But in a bodybuilding prep, when you can't turn to food or, wine or whatever to relieve some of that stress, my go-to is usually to pick a podcast that has nothing to do with business growth, because I know I have to be learning. I can't just
Yeah.
nothing. So I pick a podcast that is either about, training or something fun, something that I just want to listen to, go for a walk, or get a book, sit in the corner and read for 10, 15 minutes uninterrupted, and just take a breather and take a moment to myself. That's really the only thing you can do when you're in a bodybuilding prep, because everything else is so controlled. Your activities controlled, your nutrition, your water intake, your sleep, all of it. So when you just need that stress relief, it's really about finding something, just a few moments to yourself to shut everything out and then just kind of focus, So if you meditate, perfect. I don't do that. I would love to, but something like that essentially is my version of meditating, I guess.
Yeah, those sound like much more constructive ways to deal with stress. And you mentioned sleep, which is really interesting to me. One of my most popular blog posts was about how lawyers are so sleep deprived. And I kind of contrasted that to professional athletes who are usually very careful about getting enough sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Is getting a certain amount of sleep a part of your training for a competition?
Absolutely. And it should be a part of everybody's training for life, because if you don't sleep enough, your body doesn't function properly. And so not only do you have to sleep for muscle recovery, and actually everyone thinks that you're building muscle in the gym, but you're not. What you're doing in the gym is tearing it down. And then when you sleep is when the muscle gets built. So if you're not sleeping, you're not building any muscle. And then just your body can't function properly. So I aim, obviously you're not going to get 8 quality hours every single night, but I aim to have everything, have the lights off, have the phone down, everything by 9:30, and in bed, and I'm very strict about my work-life balance. I will cut things off at 6:30, 7 o'clock. I'm done. I don't check my email. I'm not going to answer a client if they text or call. After a certain point in time, you just have to put your foot down and be like, and prioritize your sleep. I mean, really, truly prioritizing sleep over all the other stuff first and foremost. I mean, it's the most important aspect, at least in my opinion. So.
Interesting. Well, we talked about diet and sleep. Now let's talk about getting in the gym. And, I would say most guys, at least, they go in the gym, they throw a bunch of weights on the bench. They do bench press, then they stand around for a few minutes, maybe do some more bench press, maybe go get on the Stairmaster. I'm guessing that kind of approach is not going to work for someone like you training for a serious competition.
It's not ideal. I would say you're not wasting your time, but you're certainly not utilizing your time wisely. So yeah, my programming, or I call it programming, that's kind of the lingo, I guess. But my training days are very, they're thought out usually in 2 to 3 month blocks. And things are progressively overloaded. You know, everything is very, very, very structured. Even in an off season, when I go to the gym, I don't just go in without a plan. I go in with, you know, maybe that's leg day, or maybe it's a shoulder, you know, chest day, whatever the case is. I write things down. I keep track of how I feel, how the weight felt. I keep, you know, all of that, because you really have to train with a purpose, and with an intent to actually make progress. So
Yeah.
in or out of bodybuilding, you really should train with intent, or else don't bother going to the gym, go do something else.
Well, you may have already answered this question then, but you know, a lot of people will start an exercise program and they don't really see results from it. What do you think most people are doing wrong when they get in the gym?
Either they're not doing a good program, maybe they're just following along haphazardly with different exercises or different workouts that they see online, or they're not giving themselves enough time. So I've been doing essentially the same types of workouts since I started working out. I don't do a lot of fancy stuff. Things don't really change. You know, the bread and butter are the squat, bench, deadlift. There are some accessory movements that go along with that. But I go and do the same things day in and day out. And then you just have to be patient, you know, everybody always wants to change up every couple of weeks. Well, I have to confuse the body. And I don't know where that came from. That's not a thing. You can't confuse your body. You just go in and do the movements that you know work, the movements that are hard, that challenge you, and you do the same things over and over and over. Maybe you're going to add some weight, you know, from week to week, or maybe you're going to add some reps or sets or what have you. But be patient. Like, you're not going to see results in a few weeks. It's going to take time.
So we're not going to see Shannon Montgomery doing a lot of rope climbing or tire flipping?
No, unless I'm just having a totally crazy day and I feel like just having fun and doing something totally out there, but not typically. And, you know, I mean, and that stuff works for cardio, and I mean, it definitely works, but the same thing goes if you're going to tire flip. If you flip the same weight tire every single time you do it, you're not going to get any stronger. So start with the small tire and move up to the giant tire. Sure, you're going to make some progress doing that.
Right. You know, another thing I would guess that most lawyers would say about physical fitness is just that it's hard to find the time, you know, because you're just so busy. And for someone like you, where you're doing client work and the administrative work all on your own, how do you manage your time when you're doing this training?
So one, you don't have to spend tons of time in the gym. An hour, you know, an hour and a half if I had deep into a bodybuilding prep when I have a lot of cardio to do. But you don't need any more time than 45 minutes to an hour. So that's one thing. And two, like I said earlier, if you want something, you will make it happen. So sometimes it means I'm up at 4 a.m. to make sure that I get that workout in before the meeting, or before, you know, when I was with a firm, I was in the office by 8 a.m. So I was at the gym by 4:40 every single day. I don't have kids, so I know a lot of people who have kids, it's a lot, there are a lot of moving parts. But you can make something happen. Do you have to go to a gym? No, not necessarily. You can go for a run, or you can work out in your garage, or, you know, if you want to do it, you will find the time to do it. And it's just about understanding you don't need to spend 2 hours, and it doesn't have to be the biggest gym workout. It can be a 45 minute, you know, body weight workout in your garage. So.
Yeah. Well, that's great advice. Well, let me ask you something I was wondering about competing on stage. And I'm thinking that most people, including myself, would be terrified to get on stage, like in a bathing suit. And not only that, where the people are scrutinizing everything about your appearance, right? I mean, that just does does that make you nervous? And how do you deal with that?
Yes. Super nervous, and still it makes me nervous every single time. I don't know if that ever is something that will go away. Maybe I'll let you know in a few years. But I still get nervous because it's very awkward. And especially for me, I'm just not like a very flashy center of attention kind of person. And you're getting up on stage in literally nothing, and you're being scrutinized. And as a female too, like our biggest insecurity is typically our body. But over the years, I've been able to kind of separate that being on stage and what the judges are going to say or think from who I am. And it's definitely given me so much confidence, because if I can get on stage in a bikini in some clear plastic heels, I can probably do just about anything. And I mean, that bleeds into just everything else in life. Having that confidence, and it has led me to make certain, like starting my own law firm. It's like, well, if I can get on stage and do this very awkward thing, and withstand that, there's no way I can't open my own law firm and, be at least mildly successful.
Right. Well, it's really interesting you said that, because that's exactly what I was thinking, is that if you can get up on a stage and do that, then these other things you do in your professional life seem relatively easy. Like if you're giving a presentation to a bunch of lawyers, or you're at a board meeting, or you're on a conference call, like that's not going to make you nervous.
Right.
Does it?
Still a little bit, but it's not quite the same, for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for taking the time to do this. I've got one more question before we close this out. So, and this was kind of inspired by watching that documentary, The Last Dance, about Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And one thing that comes out of that is you see this burning desire to compete and win that he had.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, how much of that do you think is important to you? Just won a competition. How important is that will to win in actually winning?
I think, I don't want to say it's key, but I think particularly in bodybuilding, if you don't have the ability to at least visualize yourself winning, you might never get there, because when it comes to bodybuilding, it's your stage presentation is most of the battle. So having that desire to win will give you more confidence on stage. It will give you the ability to really showcase what you worked so hard for. It's perfectly fine to compete and have no expectation and want to just do it for fun. But if you want to compete and you want to win, that will to win has to be paramount. Because there are times during prep where you're just like, why am I doing this? I'm tired. I'm hungry. I have to go do an hour of cardio. Like, you don't want to do it. But the desire to actually get on stage and win something just kind of pushes you through those times. So.
Yeah, well, I have to confess, I just lied because I said that was my last question, but I've got a few more. So it's just like lawyers do in a deposition. But I wanted to ask you this. Are you fun to be around in the final weeks of your training?
Ooh, probably not, honestly. You're kind of hungry and you're tired and you're just like, I'm ready to be on stage, I'm over this. So probably not.
Yeah, and after you won the overall competition, what was the first, I'll say bad food, but foods are not bad or good, but you know what I mean. What was the first thing you wanted to eat that you couldn't eat before?
Guilty pleasure. Well, one, wine, and I just can't help it. I miss wine during prep so much. So I had a little glass of wine, and then I made myself, I guess they call them brookies, but it's a brownie and chocolate chip cookie thing.
Nice.
So that I'm a sweets person, like my sweet tooth is terrible. So that's what I always want. I want the sweetest chocolatiest, peanut butteriest thing I can find. And that's what I go for. So I ate a pretty good sized brookie, we'll call it.
That sounds great. So overall, what was the most important lesson you took out of this experience of training for and winning this competition?
Well, this year was special because of COVID and because of the gym shutdowns and all the show cancellations and everything. So I think the number one lesson I learned from prepping through all of this was how resilient I am, but also just how resilient humans are, because there are so many people who were doing the same thing as I was, and we were training in our garages with, chairs and stuff, so that we could get on stage. And so I think that's key, just knowing that not only can I adapt, I can change, I can pivot when I need to, but that I am also apparently very resilient. So it was a very good life lesson, I would say, this year.
Resilience. Yeah, we all need that right now for sure.
Yeah.
So what's your next bodybuilding goal?
Right now I am taking a break. I actually am kind of dealing with a little bit of a back injury. So my training has been not great. So we're taking a break, and then probably in the beginning of next year, I will start another prep for hopefully the national shows that originally are in the summertime. We're hoping that everything goes back to normal next year, and then I can get on stage at a national show and see what the judges say. Maybe they'll like me as I am and I can win that pro card, or maybe, they'll tell me hit the gym, do these 3 things, and then come back. So that's the goal. But the long-term goal is to win a pro card. So hopefully that happens soon.
Well, I expect we're going to see that sometime in the future. Now, what is your next big professional goal? And kind of related to that, so people who interact with you and want to help you with that, what can they do to help?
Professional. I would love to be able to bring on help to do the things I hate to do. So figuring
Yeah.
out how to do that the right way, and really, I guess, scaling the business a little bit, getting better about that, because I have a tendency to just sort of take everything on and just keep everything. And starting to do a little more work, like hiring freelancers for certain things, because they always say hire out. But being a control freak, that's so hard for me. But I'm getting better at it. So professionally, I would hopefully by the end of this year, I'm in a position to where I can bring somebody in, maybe part-time, if not full-time, for some of the administrative stuff, and actually be a good manager and actually be able to tell them what it is I need, because I feel like I'm really bad about that. But that's definitely the goal. And then maybe by next year, who knows, hire an associate or something. That would be crazy, but also awesome. So.
Well, maybe people who see or hear this interview can help with that. And if people want to keep up with what you're doing professionally, your Instagram is at Montgomery Law. Is that right?
Montgomery Law, I think it has PLLC on there, to be honest. So that's the business one. And then, of course, Lifting Lawyer, you can find me there, although I haven't been super active on either of them lately because I've just been so busy, and dealing with this injury and everything has kind of kept my focus away from social media. But hopefully I'll get back on there soon, because I love being on social media. I'm such a social media addict too.
Great. Yeah. Montgomery Law, PLLC. There it is. And I follow it. And you put lots of good stuff, lots of good trademark tips, other business law tips.
I
All
try.
right. Okay, great. Well, thanks very much. I'm going to, and anything you want to add before I pause the recording?
No, thank you for having me. This was great. So much fun.